Welcome to Choosing Leadership, a podcast for leaders who refuse to play small. I am Sumit Gupta, founder of Tengen Partners. I am here because I see too many brilliant leaders trapped in daily firefights. Too many companies hitting walls that they do not need to hit. Too many people waiting for weekends instead of waking up every day excited to go to work. And very frankly, that is unacceptable to me. At Tengen Partners, we are an unapologetic call to excellence. This podcast is not about giving you more content. It is about shifting the context under which you operate. Because leadership is not a position, leadership is a choice. In each episode, I will bring you conversations with leaders who have made these choices, the uncomfortable ones, the courageous ones, and the ones that changed everything for them and their companies. And with that, keep listening and let's get started. Hi, Michelle. Welcome to the Choosing Leadership podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. Lovely to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you here. You are the CEO of TLC, which is a charity which is focusing on safe, healthy, and happy relationships across the UK. But I want to hear in your own words, who are you? Even beyond the work that you do, who are you and how did you get to where you are today?
Oh gosh, that's a big question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Who am I? Oh gosh, yeah. I suppose I'll tell you about my background. So from a town in the northwest called Stockport. So I grew up in the northwest of England, and I really, as a child, I was somebody who really loved school. I loved education. I loved learning, and I grew up in a family that was really committed to social justice. So my mum's dad, so my granddad, really involved in the kind of union movement. So I grew up thinking about social justice and how to support people in different environments. And I think that led me to, and I also had a love of reading. So I fell in love with John Grisham books as I was growing up and had this dream of being a kind of pro bono lawyer. So my kind of, if I spoke to 16-year-old Michelle, I was going to be a pro bono lawyer who was going to change the world. And then I went to college, did my A levels, and I was completely focused on going to Cambridge as a university. I wanted to have this kind of brilliant university experience. I had an interview at Cambridge and had a really challenging process that said academically, you're a good fit, but we actually don't think you're the kind of person that we think would come to Cambridge. I would have been the first person in my immediate family to go to university. And I was in a mainstream state school and hadn't understood the kind of process of applying to Cambridge. And when I found out that I'd not got in, it really knocked the wind out of my sails. And I had places at lots of other universities to do law on this kind of plan to be a lawyer. But because I was just so gutted when I hadn't got my first choice, I decided to take a year off when I was 18. And when I was 18, I worked for a national crime reduction charity called NACRO, where I was able to set up a pilot programme, which was delivering the Jig Riddingers Award to a group of young offenders and young people at risk of offending in East Manchester. And then doing that, so as an 18-year-old doing this amazing pilot project, and I just fell in love with the sector. I fell in love with the fact that you could see social justice. So never mind being a lawyer and changing the world that way, I could see the impact of charities on the sector. And I think that's what set me up to then stay in the sector. So from then on, I've been in the sector. So I then stayed at NACRO for 12 years, moved jobs, and then moved into what was Relate Greater Manchester South before it came TLC. So I've been really fortunate to grow up while I've been doing that. So did my degree and a master's degree while I was at NACRO, got married, I've got 2 children, so I've got 13 and 15-year-old girls. And all of that's been I've grown up in the sector. So I think for me, my relationship to work and the identity of who I am have been completely intertwined all the way through, really.
Yeah. Thank you. That's a beautiful journey. But I loved how you shared that like you grew up in a family where this was something you wanted to be a pro bono lawyer after reading John Grisham's books. And then there was something which happened at, say, at Cambridge, which was like reality hits.
Yeah.
And even doing a charity or making a huge impact sometimes can be like too rosy or it looks so good. But when you actually start doing it, then you are hit with reality. Can you share some of those moments where you had to face, or even maybe today, like you are running an organization, you had to do things today, or you're doing things today, which at one point it was a shock to you. It was like, oh, really? I thought this was not my path, like something. And you use the word growing up. Then also help me or help the listeners understand, how did you change? How did you grow up from those reality stickers of life?
Yeah, so I suppose the thing that jumps out the most is, so just when I joined the organisation, we used to be an organisation called Relate Greater Manchester South. So we were part of a federation of organisations across the country. So I joined that Relate Greater Manchester South organisation as chief exec back in the end of 2013. And I was 29. I had a 1 and a 2-year-old. It was my first chief exec role. And I think I was brought in as the wild card for the board of trustees. I came in and and my plan, if I'm really honest, was to do that job, my first chief exec job, until my children went to primary school. That was my intention. It was a local job. I could manage being a parent as well as doing a chief exec job. And then a couple of years in, we decided to spin out the organisation separate from the federation and set up TLC as a brand new organisation. And that happened on the 1st of April 2017. And again, I think my biggest learning was that in the run up to that process, so the 16, 17 year was really exciting. There was lots of kind of engagement, taking people on the journey with us, lots of rethinking strategy. And then we launched on the 1st of April 2017. Had this amazing external launch 10 days later, really brilliant, loads of people there, massive high. And then I woke up the day after absolutely exhausted. And with this kind of sense of, oh my goodness, what have I done? Why have I taken people on this journey? It's now really hard. And my biggest learning was that I hadn't been very good at looking after myself. I'd been so focused on the big launch and what we were doing strategically that I'd forgotten that I needed. But I suppose that adage, if you can't pour from an empty cup, I think I'd forgotten that. And the next 6 months were probably the hardest of my working life, I think. And I had to get really disciplined at looking after myself, at not doing too many hours, asking for support, being open about when I was struggling, making sure I prioritise friends and family. And that's still my biggest wake-up call. And as I say, I learned that lesson in 2017, but I've learned it continually, regularly, like almost daily ever since. And I'm about to finish for a week's holiday, but everybody will know it's really busy just before you finish for holiday. And I worked too late last night and I got started too early this morning because I wanted to make sure I was on top of everything. And I've got this kind of constant reminder to myself now all the time, which is you've got to look after yourself. You can't be a good leader unless you're making sure you're keeping yourself well.
Yeah. And I think especially in the beginning, but probably this never ends for any leader. Like there is a sense of unease, right? That will this work, or am I the right person for this, right? And for you, like you moved from being within an organization to leading an organization, which is a big change, right? At what point did you begin to get comfortable on your own skill, right? Because I have seen for myself that there's a lot of times where I'm seeking validation or I'm seeking results as proof, right? Okay, now I can do this job. But that has a big cost from the inside. So for you, how has that journey been to really be into the shoes of a leader, an entrepreneur, rather than just be part of a bigger umbrella?
So I think it's a journey that's you're always on. I don't think it's ever completely done. And there's definitely times when I still think I'm playing a bit of a game and somebody's going to pinch me and say, wake up now, you're not really old enough or mature enough to actually be doing this job. But I do think the role of chief exec is an interesting one because I've got a brilliant senior team that I work with, but ultimately I still line manage them. So I'm part of the team, but I'm not part of the team. And then I've got a brilliant board of trustees who are really supportive and challenging, but I'm not on the board. And that kind of bit where you're in the middle can be quite lonely at times. And I think, so sometimes that's imposter syndrome. Sometimes that's thinking that you want to make decisions by consensus because that feels easier. Sometimes it's like knowing that you can rest in the kind of authority that you've got of being the one who can make the decision. But my biggest thing has been the impact of surrounding myself with amazing peers in the sector. So other chief execs, other leaders who get it, champion each other, support you, the kind of people you pick the phone up to when you're like, oh gosh, I just don't know what to do. People that I've cried with and spoken to and sat and found solutions with. And so I think I'm not sure I've ever had a day when I think, oh, I'm brilliant at this job. I think I've had like lots of days when I think I just want to try the very hardest that I can to do the best that I can for my team, my organisation, the thing that we're here for. I don't know, maybe there are some leaders who have it nailed and have that feeling. I'm not sure that's me, to be honest.
Yeah. And like many times we overcompensate for that, right? Like you mentioned, like last night. But what is it that you try very hard, like that nobody sees, right? Say something in you. Is it that imposter syndrome, or is it some fear or worry? What is it that becomes difficult, where you put on a mask rather than be honest and totally you?
So I think my biggest thing is I'm somebody who likes to be liked. So I try and be a really values-based leader. I try and do the right thing. I try and be like open and honest and transparent. But then I know that sometimes you have to make really hard decisions, and you can't always explain all the reasons behind the decisions that you're making. And what that means is if I go into a situation where I'm worried that people aren't going to agree with me, or not necessarily agree with me, but aren't going to understand the process I've gone through to the decision I've got to,
Yeah.
I can really overthink that. I can get myself, do you know that kind of horrible churny feeling that you get in your tummy sometimes when you're going into a meeting and you're feeling on the back foot, or you're feeling nervous? And then they're the nights when I don't sleep very well, when I have to talk it through. My poor husband gets used to me talking through all the different outcomes that might happen or not. Trying to get out of my own head in that is quite hard. And I think it comes from a place of wanting to do the best, but also knowing that sometimes the best decisions aren't the decisions that people like. So I think that's the tension for me, is holding that is something I find quite hard still sometimes.
Yeah. And since your work is all about relationships, right? I think this is something in our culture as well, right? To be liked, to be understood. And then we strive to be accepted in whichever societies or communities we are part of. And many times that can create a lot of loneliness, right? Because you're striving to, and you're not being yourself by definition. If you're striving to be liked or to be understood or tailoring your words, you're not being authentic, and that eats you up from the inside. So what do you see as a wider phenomena, right? Because I see a lot of issues where people have with relationships is about somebody not understanding them, and they are over striving, right? So,
Yeah.
and then how do you see relationships or even the world that we live in evolve, especially when it comes to being our own individual beings, free, and then still working with people, having relationships, whether it's personal or professional? What do you see happening in the wider world?
I think, especially at the moment, we're in a world that feels more polarized than it has for a long time. There's the kind of political position, the wars that are happening across the world. And I think the financial challenges that people are in, that kind of like polarization of views is really significant for people. And I think that plays out in our day-to-day relationships as well as everything else. And the kind of tensions that we feel sometimes about how you feel professionally and how you feel personally. And like organisationally, we talk about trying to bring as much of yourself to work that you feel comfortable to do. But that means that people bring that they vote politically differently than you, that they've got different views than you, different religions, different faiths, different belief systems. So I think that kind of polarisation is more present than it's been before. And I think for me, it is all about relationships. It's all about being honest and authentic and open and transparent and accepting and inquisitive and curious, really wanting to get to know people and understanding that difference is brilliant. And that's a real value in organisations and cultures in the world. But that, I think, takes a lot of openness and transparency.
And what's the vision that you stand for, right? Even personally and as an organization, what is the kind of world that you want to see, which like often comes up in your language when you meet your team, when you talk to people? I'm not talking vision as like something which lies on a poster, but which is actually spoken about, which people feel. What is that future that you stand for?
I think the thing for me is about, and I feel like if you like, what's the saying? Like you cut somebody like through the middle, what would run through them like a kind of in a strip of rock? And for me, it is about the importance of relationships and our not TLC's vision, but TLC's picture that we have is of we think of a circle, and we think of a child or an adult in the middle. And when I explain this to people, in my head, I've got me as a little girl and I've got my mum. So that's the picture I have in my head. So it's a circle with a child and adult in the middle and a circle of around them. And it's the relationships that you have, that child or adult has with themselves, with their partner or their ex-partner, their family, their friends, with school or with work, with the community. And the sense that a world in which all those relationships are safe and healthy and happy means that everybody's going to be okay. And actually, it's not saying that the world stops being difficult, because it doesn't for any of us. but that if we've got a circle of support around us, we can rest back on it and we can be okay because that circle wraps you up. And I think it's like a circle of cotton wool. It also wraps you up in cotton wool and keeps you going. And if I think about what I say to the team or what my colleagues say to their team members, we want our organisation to be somewhere that feels like that for people, that feels that you can be safe, healthy and happy in the organisation and that we can then live that in the world. So that's, and then as a citizen of the world, that I can benefit from that relationships around me are safe, healthy and happy. So the kind of image in my head is these little balls of cotton wool that then get bigger and bigger as they all join together. And that if we could crack that, actually people will be okay. That doesn't get rid of the challenges in life that we all face, and whether that's illness or bereavement or discrimination or challenge, it doesn't get rid of any of that. But it says that if we have that kind of circle around us, we can be looked after and supported through it.
Yeah. Can you share a bit more about how that happens? Because I also know that you have been growing, right? You are merging with other charities and you're getting bigger, which means, first of all, the team size is getting bigger and you are probably also working with new people.
Yeah.
Now, I think that complicates that vision or that desire because you have to build trust. You have to make people buy into you, not just what you're saying, but even to you. And yes, there are organizational challenges, right? As you get bigger, there are cash flow challenges. There are like a bigger public face that you are now probably having, like even for the media and all.
Yeah.
Can you share what do you face as a challenge in the day to day as you try to, like, let's say, model what you want to create inside the organization?
Yeah. It's a really good question because, so we've been through a significant period of growth in the last 12 months. So we've doubled in size in about 12 months and we've gone from being a local organisation in Greater Manchester to a Northwest organisation in England to a Northern organisation now to across the whole of the UK. And part of the way we did that in the last 12 months was merging in with 7 other organisations merged into TLC. And I think if you'd have asked me 12 months ago, we knew how we managed culture in the organisation. We had lots of engagement activities that we built over time. We were small enough that although I didn't necessarily know everybody, there was lots of connection. There was lots of in-person time. We did monthly coffee and cake sessions with the team. We had regular kind of communication opportunities, lots of staff engagement activities, staff networks. We knew how it worked. Taking it nationally is very different. So we're having to scale what we do and relearn what we do and do new things. And my biggest learning at the moment is that's going to take a little bit of time and effort. And so at the moment, what I'm doing is quite a lot of trying to be visible with our new teams. So last week I had a day when I was in our Bristol and Bath office. So I'm based in Greater Manchester. So Bristol and Bath office went with no agenda other than to go and have cake and I say coffee, but I actually don't drink coffee, but Diet Coke with the team. And then a similar day in Romford office near London. And it was all about just getting to know people. And it was so incredibly valuable because I got to know how the experience had felt for them so far, what had not gone well. Some of the most interesting things, the things that maybe the central team thought had gone well, but the local team didn't think had gone well. So that was quite interesting as well. And so it's what we're trying to do is reshape how do we create that sense of psychological safety culture in the organisation. I don't think we've nailed it yet, if I'm honest. I think we're on this massive journey of trying different things. And I think it's got to be a mixture of lots of communication engagement, but also lots of, for me, just doing what we say we're going to do. So promising to do things, following through on them, but also being really honest and open and apologetic when we get it wrong and learning when we get it wrong. And so people will hear me say a lot that we're learning as we're going. Like something when you're flying a plane and you're building the plane at the same time. Like we're learning as we're going and we're going to make mistakes, but we just need to be open and honest about that and model that it's okay to get things wrong, but we then need to fail quickly and learn quickly and apologise. But it's a big, interesting challenge for us about how we keep developing that kind of internal culture, because I think that we think that's the most critical thing for people.
Yeah. And what part of leadership, because from the outside, it looks wonderful, right? You're growing, you're getting bigger, you have more people, you have bigger responsibility, like we call this growth, right? But what is it that you're realizing from the inside, right? It looks all rosy from the outside, that like from the inside, it sounds like emotionally brutal.
I think I don't know if I'd say brutal. It's emotionally, I would say, definitely, because I think personally, there's definitely an increased sense of responsibility. There's definitely a sense of wanting to do this really well. So one of my biggest beliefs as a leader is that if people are happy at work, they do their best work, and that when people are happy, they need to have all the resources around them. They need to feel safe. They need to be trusted. They need to feel connected to the organisation. So I feel a real responsibility trying to help create an organisation that continues to be that for people. And then also, especially with the areas that have merged into us, we're on this journey of trying to grow our service delivery because we're a service delivery organisation. We want to extend relationship support to people who need it. But to do that, we've got to generate some more income so we can deliver some more services in those areas. And there's always a time delay. So we can have the vision and the strategy now, but there'll be a delay between us having that and actually the money coming in. And then there'll be another delay before the work starts. So trying to keep people engaged and enthused on that journey, and also with a level of awareness that it's going to take a bit of time. I think they feel like tensions we're managing all the time. And then I suppose the other bit is that you overlay all of the challenges that every charity chief exec has in the sector: funding volatility, like commissioning challenges, cash flow issues. You overlay that, and what happened is they've just got bigger. It's not that I think maybe at some point I thought you get to a magic number and it gets a bit easier. And actually, I've just realised you just amplify the challenge. It doesn't, you've got more people alongside you with it, but it doesn't disappear.
Yeah. And so my next question would be, again, coming back to you as you have grown, right? And you will probably keep on growing, right? So if the charity, let's say, is double the size it is today, what is it that it will require of you at Michelle, right? What is it that you are doing today that probably doesn't scale at that level? Probably you have already something which you were doing last year, which cannot scale. And what is it that you are totally not doing, or totally you don't even think this is my skill set or my ability, that you will have to pick up if you have to lead and be happy yourself as well?
Yeah. Yeah, and so I think it's really interesting. I've just been talking to a colleague about it, how the job is the job changes all the time, and the bigger you grow, the more the job changes, and it's almost like applying for a new job all the time, but you're in the same organisation. So I think if I compare now to where I was 12 months ago, I am far less operationally involved in what's happening in the organisation. And if I think about us growing again, I think I'm going to get even further away from that. And that does involve some significant changes. So I think for me, it involves real trust in the other leaders we've got in the organisation, the teams we've got in the organisation. But it does mean some organisational change. So it's easier to get visibility of what's going on. Because a few years ago, we were all based in the same room, never mind the same building. Now we're all over the country. So our systems change. So for me, the ability to get close to the services that we're delivering, which is the reason I do the job, gets harder the bigger we get. And the ability for me to be close to the people delivering that work gets harder the bigger we get. And therefore, I think I've got to some degree, become comfortable with that. That's a bit of grieving and letting that go a little bit. I've also got to work really hard at completely trusting and supporting my leadership teams and team managers and service managers across the country to do that piece of work. But we've also there's a bit that we don't do very well at the moment, is making sure that the stories from the work gets translated all the way across the organisation. Because it used to be that you knew the stories and the impact because you sat and saw it happen, or that you sat and chatted to somebody who just delivered the piece of work. I don't get to do that anymore. So I've got to learn how to do that. And I go back to, I think, probably my first experience in the sector when I was based in Manchester delivering Duke of Edinburgh's award, and the chief exec of NACRO was based in London and was a great chief exec. But at the same time, I felt a real disconnect between the work that I did in Manchester and the strategic decisions that were made in London. And I desperately don't want that for the organisation. I want us to be connected and be in sync together and in step together. So I think I've got loads of things that I need to learn that are different about that.
Yeah.
But then I suppose the other bit, that's the internal lens. And then the external lens is that I know how to have relationships with commissioners and stakeholders in the North and the Northwest, because I've been doing that for years and I've been building it over time. I now need to learn the skills with national media, with national government, with those kind of influencing and campaigning skills that become different as you get bigger. And that's a whole new skill set for me to learn,
Yeah.
which is going to be quite exciting, but quite nerve-wracking as well, I think.
Yeah. I will ask you maybe something different, right? Because this is something which I hear often from entrepreneurs or leaders, especially when their role is changing, that I know this, but I have to learn this, right? Something
Yeah.
like this. And yes, there is always some learning, some adaptation along the way. But what I often say to these people, and what I would say to you, what if there is nothing new to learn, right? You have been a CEO or you have been in a leadership role for a decade or more. And yes, the territory is new and you will learn and adapt on the way. But what if there is nothing to hold yourself back on right now? And what if you can just go in without any apprehension or without any filter? How would that be? Because many times I see entrepreneurs have this vision of I'm good here, but I'm not good here, which is just in their mind.
And I think there's always stuff to learn. And I think it's that what is the kind of edge where, so I feel like I operate the best as a person when I'm just outside my comfort zone. So I'm stretching myself. I'm challenged. I'm still supported, but I'm like constantly learning new things. And I think if I don't do that, I get bored. So I think for me, that little bit of anxiousness or nervousness is a positive because I can then channel it into how do I do more. And because I think for me, I don't want us to grow because I want us to have an empire. I want us to grow because I completely, utterly believe in what we do and the impact it has for people. And I think if I ever get to the stage that I think I can just do the job with my eyes closed, then I'm not the right person to be doing the job. I think for me, it's always about wanting to push the boundaries. And pushing the boundaries will always, I think, for me, involve having to push myself and be a little bit scared. And for me personally, that's not a bad thing for me because I know that's where I work the best. And I don't know if that's quite an entrepreneurial mindset as well, is that you always pushing for the next thing. And for me, that's quite motivating.
Yeah. I would say I totally get what you're coming from, but I would say that's almost like an entrepreneurial trap.
Okay.
Like that, because it's like you're chained yourself to the ground. And that, yes, it gives you energy. It makes you push a little bit outside of the comfort zone. But if you unchain yourself, if you don't see this as this is what my grounding is, sometimes you can do some crazy things, right? And the result which you would normally have in 10 years, what if you can have that in 3 years, right? Because you're not going through a process. You're saying, I am like 10 years is more than enough to learn, to grow. And yes, learning never stops, right? And discomfort never stops, but I am not setting my ambitions or my targets or my strategies based on a little bit better from the past. I'm saying if this is the outcome and I really believe in this work, then if I'm out there, I want to speak to this person. I want to go bold rather than safe.
And do you know what? And I think that's laying the mantle down for me, isn't it? Which is great. I think I'm definitely somebody who is motivated by a challenge. So I think that's right. Why not think bolder and bigger?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think I'll definitely take that challenge.
Yes. What would be a dream come true if you have a magic wand? What would you want to create in the next 12 months?
For TLC or just
in TLC, but also whatever you are doing in TLC is to create some impact outside, right? So just if you can connect the dots.
So I think for me, if there was a magic wand, what I would really like is to end the postcode lottery that there is at the moment in the UK about where people can access support. So at the moment, there is, for people who need relationship support, whether that's around domestic abuse or kind of counselling and therapy or family mediation, at the moment, there is a postcode lottery in the UK, and depending on where you live and depending on what resources that you have, that impacts on what services you can provide. And my magic wand would be to end that so that for people who need relationship support, they can access it at a time in a way that works for them. I think that is the dream. The dream is that anybody who needs relationship support across the UK can access it. And that involves some systemic change to the system, and it includes some significant funding change and some societal change. But that would be the dream, is that when people need support, they access the support that's right for them in a way that works for them. Yeah, that's the absolute dream.
You said something wonderful, that you can't really give from an empty cup, right? And to go after something like this, which you're anyways going after, if you are suffering while doing that, then I would say, what's the point, right? As a leader, as a team, I think you have to be that, like you have to demonstrate or live by those values. And many times living by those values means as a leader, we have to know that we are not alone and
Yeah.
there is support. And many times, even with your team, you can't share so many things because everybody has a job and everybody has a role in the organization, which is not the same as your role. What are those questions? What are those thoughts that probably you don't get to share with anybody, where you want like a space or a medium, but maybe on the other hand, maybe also support so that you can go after this vision that you described?
I suppose the questions are about how, I think to go after that kind of big vision
Yeah.
is around having space and time to work through how do you get there and then be big and bold like we were talking about.
Mm.
And I think the realities are that the day to day of being a leader is pretty busy. And if you're not careful, you spend your day to day
Yeah.
doing the urgent stuff, but not the important stuff. So you focus on the things that present in front of you, not the things that come through your emails, the meeting requests that come through, rather than this is actually what I'm striving for. And I think they're probably some of the questions that I need to ask more of, or could ask more about. How do I get out of the way so that my team can just get on with everything that they're doing, and to then free up the space for me to do some of the big dreams and go after some of the societal change bits that we want. And I think I probably don't ask those questions as much as I should do, because you're in a system and you get used to supporting each other and you work in a certain way. And also you need a bit of space and time sometimes to step back. But I think the questions are, if we're going to go after a complete systemic change in the UK for relationships, what do I need to do differently? And how do I need to show up differently? And how do I need to make space to do that for myself?
Yeah, I think this reminds me of like a US Navy SEALs quote or a slogan or a motto. And they say, slow down to speed up, right? If you have to go fast, slow down first. And I think this is what you're pointing about, right? If you're too busy, you don't have the mental space to really even dream big or let alone take action there, right? And what I want to ask you is, one of the things that every leader has to get good at is saying no, right? Sometimes it's just saying no to yourself. No, I won't do this. Or sometimes it's saying no to somebody else. As you said, something urgent, but maybe not as important in the long term. How is your relationship with saying no to yourself and to other people?
Yeah, so it has been really bad at times. I'm getting better at it, I think, but with a lot of discipline and effort. So I think there's definitely a bit of me that naturally is a bit of a people pleaser, which kind of involves saying yes a lot. And I've realised that's not good for me. It's not good for the organisation. So I'm getting more comfortable with saying no and weighing when my yes is yes and when my no is no. And yes, but it's taking a lot of practice, I would say. And I think it's something it's like a muscle that I regularly have to keep training, I think. And it's also recognising that, so we've just said no to a big organisational opportunity. So we've had an opportunity in the last few months and we've weighed it and we've said no. And it was the right decision to say no. And I've almost seen people take a kind of sigh of relief when they've heard me say no to it, rather than, I think, the reaction I would have got if we'd have pushed on anyway. But for me, so that what I've done is over the last 6 months, I spend a bit of time every morning doing some kind of journaling activity, because I'm somebody who likes action and I kind of go. So I've had to build in myself that kind of space of reflection and thought, and that kind of journaling activity. One of the things that I look at in my journal is the kind of decisions I make and whether I've made the right ones or not. And I am starting to see more times I say no than yes, which is positive. But it's definitely not something that comes naturally to me. So it's like I am definitely having to work at it.
Yeah, and I loved how you described it as a muscle, right? It's like if you use it, it becomes stronger. But if you don't use it, it also becomes weaker and gets more difficult.
Yeah.
What is something that you know in your bones, right? But you have been procrastinating, or you have been like considering it, because making a clear call could be a yes or a no. It's not easy, as you were just talking about.
So really interesting. So we're doing a significant strategic piece of work at the organisation at the moment around bringing together different parts of the organisation into one unified structure. And I've known that's been the right decision for the last 3-4 months. And I've been procrastinating, I think, about when to bring it to the table, when to bring people on the journey, when to be open and transparent about. And I think partly because of your thing that you just said about sometimes you have to go slow to go fast.
Yeah.
So I think I'd got there earlier, but I didn't think anybody else in the organisation or the team was ready for it yet. And I've been slowing down. But what's been interesting is that I deliberately slowed down to give people time to settle because we had such a period of change last year. But in that slowing down, I built up for myself a narrative that when I then told people about the direction we were going on, that I'd get some negative feedback. And actually what happened is I slowed down and then we're on a engagement process and everybody's now completely in support and full steam ahead. So the slowing down was good. But what was interesting is that because maybe procrastinate is the wrong word, because I deliberately slowed down, but the slowing down did something inside of me to build some kind of negative language inside of myself, which I've had to then get out of again. But it's been interesting because, like you say, I knew in the bones what was the right decision. I was just waiting for the right engagement point.
Yeah. You shared something earlier. I think this connects, right? So first of all, thanks for sharing it openly, like in a public interview like this. I appreciate that.
No
But you
problem.
said something about apologizing when you make mistakes. But I think just on what you shared, there is also a place for a leader to be unapologetic about what they believe in, what they stand for,
Yeah.
and yet be humble enough to learn and apologize if required, but not to carry an apology with you. If you're being bold, if you're taking a stand, to be unapologetic. How do you see this balance for yourself, right? Because you're taking on a bigger mandate. You see there's a lot to be done. Probably there's a lot of places where you can be unapologetic and speak out like what you have in mind. And yes, if you do that, there will also be, let's say, mistakes or things not working out or somebody getting upset. And then you will have to be humble and adapt. So how do you see this balance, right? Sometimes you can be too safe and sometimes you can be too bold.
Yeah, I think it is a balance. And I think so the best example of it, I think, is that I think I'm very strongly unapologetic about how ambitious we are for the organisation. And I think that's partly because sometimes in charities, when you talk about being on a growth agenda, people see that as kind of money grabbing and following the money and focusing on the business element rather than the kind of sector element. And for me, I am strongly unapologetic about our ambition because we believe in what we do. And if we believe in it and we think it changes people's lives, and a lot of our team have directly benefited from the services that we deliver, why would we not want to extend that to more people? But being ambitious for growth means that sometimes we don't get it right. We're batting for that really big thing, but sometimes it goes wrong. So I think for me, the unapologetic bit is the kind of, this is what we're going for. This is the journey we're on. Almost to kind of come on the journey with us, or if it's not the right one for you, that's okay. But this is where we're going. We're going for an ambitious journey, a growth agenda, because what our teams deliver for safe, healthy, happy relationships is transformational. But the humbleness comes in knowing we're learning as we're going. We'll make mistakes on the way. Sometimes we'll go too fast. Sometimes we'll go too slow. Sometimes we'll do something after misstep. I think it's holding that unapologetic ambition with the apology when we make mistakes on the way is how we're achieving it. But and I think the balance is knowing that making mistakes on the way doesn't mean that the ambition is wrong. We've got to hold both. And obviously we want to make as few mistakes as we can. But also I think the more we lean into taking healthy risks, the more entrepreneurial we are, the more likely it is that some things won't work. And I think that's okay, as long as we fail quickly, learn quickly, apologise quickly and move on. But I think we should never then hold back on that ambition, because we want to change the world for relationships. That's what we want to do. And that is bold and brave, and it's a big statement. And I don't think we should apologise for that at all.
Absolutely. I love that, how simply you said that. And I think you mentioned it, and I've seen in my work with some charity work that this notion around money or business, it's almost not seen as a good thing. It's like almost you are betraying our origins or something like that. While if you are a leader and you choose to be run totally by grants, it's your choice. And if you're a leader and you choose to do something to get some cash flow or to be sustainable as an organization, again, it's your choice, right? Nobody gets to question you how to run your organization, and which is there everywhere. But I think it's a lot more in the nonprofit, in the charity world. Yeah.
So I think the fact that we're a social purpose organisation who exists because of our mission of trying to create safe, healthy, happy relationships, but we're also a business that employs 160 people and has to pay our invoices on time and needs to pay our salaries. And I think, again, I remember my first few weeks in the job and checking the bank account every day just to check what our cash flow position was. And 10 years in, I still check the bank account every day. And at some point, maybe I won't, I don't know. But being able to pay people fairly and on time feels pretty important to me. So that's a business thing, isn't it? But it's so critical to us doing the work that we do really well. So I don't think there's a tension with that. I think it's a kind of false dichotomy for people who say there is.
Yeah. And I think since we're talking about relationships, one of those relationships is our relationship with money, not even just as a leader, but even as a human being. And many times that creates a lot of stress rather than, because what I think is money is never against you or for you, right? And money can as much be a source of joy, of happiness, of giving, of contribution, than it can be a source of envy, jealousy, stress. And how do you see that? Is that maybe a part of your work, like our relationship with money or other non-living things, which impacts then our relationship with human beings?
Yeah, so interesting. So the focus of the work that TLC does is on the relationship that people have with, but I think as an organisation, as a charity, the relationship to money is really interesting.
Yeah.
So as a charity, TLC, we've got really diversified income streams, which has been a really deliberate process because we wanted to grow and mitigate risk. So we have some financial arrangements with commissioners and local authorities where they commission us to do work. We've got some trust and grants who support us. We've got some income that's fundraised. We've got some income that's earned where we sell our services. And so we've got a whole range of different funding opportunities, which is really deliberate, some more commercial than others. But I think, therefore, the interesting relationship with money is, so we're not an organisation that's 100% fundraised like some charities are. And therefore, some of the income, the money that we get is restricted and some of it isn't. And what's really interesting is how we get the narrative right, that we need fundraised unrestricted income as well as that commissioned income. So I think the relationship with the sector and money is quite interesting. And we definitely see that we're doing a national relationships survey at the moment. And one of the questions that we ask in that is, how has the cost of living crisis and the financial situation that people are in affected their relationships with their loved ones? And the survey closes in a few weeks' time, so we've not got all the results yet. But the initial results are showing that the last few years' financial picture for people individually has massively affected the health of the UK's relationships. Less financial flexibility means that relationships suffer.
Yeah. So one more question before we wrap this up, right? Beyond all of this business leadership, what is it that is a very important part of you and your life that probably the people you work with would not know?
Interesting. So the most important thing to me is my faith. So I'm a Christian, became a Christian when I was 16, and my faith is something that drives everything that I do. But we're an organisation that's not faith-based, and we've got people from lots of different faiths and people with no faiths in the organisation. I am pretty open about it, but I'm also conscious that we're a really inclusive organisation. But that's the bit. So that's the kind of hidden bit that, for people who know me the most, will be the bit that will be the most prominent, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. For me, sometimes two things which sound opposite of each other can go together, right? So if I am very strongly attached to something, it could be God, it could be a faith, I can still be inclusive, I can still be open. And that, while that might not be the perception when you speak about it for the other person, but I see that wherever we create a distinction between either this or that, but we forget that there is also a space for both to exist together, even though logically it doesn't make sense, right? It's like, how can you be this and that? But many times in real life, it's not logical, and it can actually coexist together. So thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that.
And I think that's where the beauty of life is sometimes. So for me, the diversity of people that we have around us, diversity of thought, diversity of belief, that's what makes life wonderful. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Where would you say somebody listening to this episode and wanting to get in touch with you or find out more about your work can go to?
So I think if people see this on LinkedIn, then I'm really happy for me to approach me directly on LinkedIn, send me a message. I'm always happy to be contacted. Or if you go to our website, which is www.talklistenchange.org.uk, again, you can get my contact details if you want to reach out to me directly or reach out to the team, and somebody will be really happy to help.
Perfect. This was beautiful, Michelle. Thank you for coming up on the show, sharing not just about what you do, but about who you are, and then speaking openly and freely about many things, which is not always easy to speak about.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's been lovely to chat to you. Thank you for some really challenging and thoughtful and reflective questions as well all morning.
Thank you.
No problem.
That's it for this episode of Choosing Leadership. Here is what I want you to know. You are capable of so much more than you currently think that you are. And that is not because I have all the answers. That is because I have lived it. I have gone from hiding behind a comfortable tech career to building companies, coaching CEOs, and standing for impossible dreams like taking India's volleyball team to the Olympics. So if this episode hits you, if it resonated with you, share it. Tag someone who needs to hear this. Tag someone who is currently playing smaller than you know that they are capable of. And if you are a leader ready to play the biggest game of your life, if you are ready to make those 100 million jumps, then reach out and let's talk about being a guest on this show. If you want to go deeper, visit tengenpartners.com or find me on LinkedIn. Once again, remember, mediocrity is a choice and so is excellence. I'm your host, Sumit Gupta, and until the next time, keep listening, keep choosing leadership.